UNO has always been an expanding university, constantly moving forward. But as we move forward, we must also look back to where we began. Let's go back in time with the people who remember UNO the way it was. Join us for Reflections in Time.
Well, I'm glad that you joined us wherever you may happen to be as you watch this particular tape. It's a rather special tape we feel here at UNO. It's not really a television show in the normal sense. What it is a part of a series we've been working at here at UNO for many, many years. We've come to call it Reflections in Time. And what we do is sit down with a person who is still or has been and now retired with our university for lots and lots of years. Staff and faculty. Oh, I've had some very interesting afternoons and mornings visiting over the years with lots of people. And what I've been getting over the years has been an interesting picture of the person, but then also of the university of which they've been a part. And that's what a university is made up really of, I think. Not just buildings and roads, but people. People, many of whom have stayed and worked here for a lot of years. And today is no exception. A man who came to our university, about 20 years ago. And I've asked him to come by and help us reflect on his time here at the university. I'm referring to Assistant Professor Lloyd Gwardney, who came by just a few weeks before we started to tape this program. He retired from the university. Lloyd, I'm glad you could come and sit down and chat with me for a while.
Well, thank you. Great opportunity.
Well, first of all, and I don't think even a lot of your colleagues would know something of this, we want to have it on the tape. Where did Lloyd come from? Where are you from, Lloyd?
Well, I was born on a farm in Leavenworth County, Kansas. Our little town was Easton, Kansas. And I'm the oldest of 4 children. And I have a sister who is also a teacher in Leavenworth. And I guess of my generation, I'm probably the first that completed college, even though it took me a lifetime to do it.
Did you, I grew up pretty much on a farm too, Lloyd, and I wonder, sometimes it's not easy to leave the farm. Why was it that, what caused you, and back in those days, why did you become a farmer, I guess I'd ask you? That was part of your life. You grew up taking care of the cattle and working in the field, I imagine?
Well, I worked hard on the farm, I guess, and I was there one year after graduating from high school in 1936. And it was hard to make a buck.
Yeah, 1936, tough times.
And
dry period down there too, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I suppose my inspiration to become a teacher was given to me by an aunt who suggested, Lloyd, why don't you try teaching school? And I took the county teacher's examination, and I suppose a unique experience happened in my first teaching experience.
What was your first teaching experience?
Well, it was as a substitute in a country school. The teacher had gotten married before the school term started, and during the year she had a baby. Now, that was something that teachers didn't do in those days. I mean, they didn't get pregnant and they didn't have babies.
No.
And so she asked me to substitute for her, and I did, and for some reason it struck a chord that I started looking for a job for the next fall, because after all, you could make a little money teaching school.
Now, one interesting thing you mentioned a while ago there, Lloyd, you mentioned you took the teacher certification test or whatever it was.
Yes.
Was that what basically qualified a person to go out and teach in a grade school?
Yes, it was a county teacher's exam, they called it. And I took the you know, I almost feel like I have had divine guidance in my in my career, in that I took the last one that was offered in our county. After that, you had to have college. And so fact of the matter, the certificate I got was a 2-year one, but it was issued in January, and so it expired in January, and I had to go to summer school in between the terms to get a emergency certificate to complete the 2nd year.
Now, had you had any college training at all previously?
None whatsoever.
No.
None whatsoever. I guess people must have thought I knew a little something. I mean, I had been a good student, I guess, in grade school and high school. Made good grades. I had lots of book learning, but I guess not much what they call smart.
Yeah. Well, you went at it. You taught. You made a success of it. Was this a country school?
Yes.
8 grades?
The whole 8 grades.
Oh, yeah. That's quite a challenge for a young fellow. Wow.
Yes, and I was, they talk about integrated schools. In my first school, I had 2 little black boys in my country school. So I taught in an integrated school before they ever thought about it.
Is that right? Well, that's interesting, too. Well, you've got a taste of teaching in what some people would say would be a very hard situation, having all these different grades, all these different people. Here you were, really kind of fresh out of high school, right?
Right.
But you liked it, and you went on. What happened next?
Well, after the 2 years, then I decided to go to college, and I went to Kansas State Teachers College at Emporia.
What year would this have been, Lloyd?
Now, this would have been 39 and 40.
Right in the time when World War II was starting.
Yes, and then I followed it in the summer of 40. So I got what they called a 30-hour teaching certificate.
2 years, huh?
2 years. So I went back and completed 1 year, and then got married in the spring of that first year.
Where did you meet your wife?
At school.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that was
at college.
Yes, that was probably the greatest thing that came out of the college. Because she's been a great inspiration and a great motivator all along. And then we went back in the 2nd year, and of course in that December was Pearl Harbor, and I was inducted in, I always remember that, the Kansas birthday, January 29th, 1942, I was inducted into the service. You went in very early, right after Pearl Harbor almost. Right. What area of service did you go into? Well, I went into the infantry, and that was a tough place. Tell us a little about service life. That's well, I think some of my service life, I guess I usually or frequently say I dug up most of the state of Louisiana. And I went to officers' school. I guess I was always told to get as far or do as much as you can. So I applied for officers' school and OCS, Bennington, Georgia, and I graduated as they call them, 90-day wonders, second lieutenant, and I was assigned to the 103rd Infantry Regiment down in Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. And from there, then I was selected as a replacement officer. So I was shipped to the South Pacific. And we went over on the old USS President Grant. It was an old wooden deck luxury liner that had been put back into service. And I suppose my unique experience with that was over in the South Pacific when we were about a day from where we were supposed to land. We hit a coral reef, and we sat there on that coral reef for a day and a night, and we were taken off with kind of tugboats, jumping from boat to boat out there in the sea. You didn't sink anyway? No, we didn't sink. But then they took us into New Guinea, and from there then they were beginning to pull the troops back and sending up replacements, and from there then I went to the Admiralties and was signed, if you can believe it, to a Coast Artillery from Brooklyn. Is that right? That was an experience. And we stayed there on the little island in the Admiralties for over 2 years.
What, you were guarding the island?
We were guarding the island because it was a naval depot. It was a supply, and they also repaired ships there. And it was an important key for the Navy, and we were to guard the harbor. We had what they call 155 long toms. They had a projectile about 2 foot long and biggies, and that was our job.
Sounded like pretty good duty, though. Well, if you were stuck in the South Pacific, but kind of boring, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it was palm trees all around us.
Yeah.
Those islands had been in as palm tree plantations, and the natives, of course, the natives were the only inhabitants there, and they were what you'd call natives. I mean, there was no social. I mean, there was nothing civilized there. It was just pure native. No schools, no churches, no stores.
Is that right?
They just lived off the palm trees and the palm.
Fairly small island?
Yes, it was about, well, I'd say about 2 miles long and about 600-700 yards wide.
Well, you were kind of confined then, weren't you?
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
That was
well, 2 years there, and I bet you were ready to get off.
We were ready.
It's like being on a big ship almost. You're so confined. What happened then? Was that pretty well on into the war then? Where did you go next?
Well, we stayed there until the war was over, and then we stored our property and shipped it away, and came home, and I was discharged then on March the 6th, 1946.
Remember that, coming home?
Yes, I do.
After all those years?
Well, howdy. I often wondered if, you know, when you go up that gangplank and leave, you wonder, is this trip really necessary, and am I coming back?
Right.
But it was quite a time.
Great experience to come home.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, now you're home again. You have a wife, and you have been a teacher. You've been an officer in the service. What's a guy like you going to do next? Well, that's an interesting question, because I said when I went in, one thing good will happen out of this war. It'll get me out of teaching school. So when I got back, well, there were a lot of other people coming back too. Right. And some of them had jobs that they had left that they'd go back to. This would be about 1946, maybe? Yes, and I had no job to go back to because the schools was rolled on and my position had been filled. And so I waited around that spring. My wife had taught school the last 2 years. While you were in service, she was teaching? She taught school. She got an emergency certificate and taught her home school. And, so I had a brother-in-law up in Kansas, and he said he always wanted to get some of his family up there around, and he said, we sure do need a school teacher, principal up in a little school. Here we go again. And so he says, why don't you come up? And so I went up, and I guess when I was in the service, I thought, if I ever get back home and can get me a job and make $2,400 a year, I'll have it made. So I went up there and asked them for $2,400, and they took me up. And in those days, that was pretty good money, wasn't it? Rent was $20 a month. And I stayed there for 5 years. Well, did you go there, did you say, as an administrator? Well, it was a little 2-3 teachers, developed into a 3-teacher school. They called them administrators. You were the head teacher, taught the 7th and 8th grades. The rural high school was also in that building, and it was just a small school. And our plan was we would make a move every 5 years and try to go up the ladder. So at the end of the 5 years, we started looking for a job that would pay $4,000. $2,400 wasn't quite enough anymore. No. So, and this was the flood year, 1951. Oh yeah. And so
we looked around quite a while. Finally, we found this school system out in western Kansas, Greensburg, Kansas. And they offered to pay me the $4,000, and so I took the job. Now, this was a graded school.
Oh, now you're getting into a bigger place.
I was into a big show where we had 2 teachers in every grade, and the superintendent was pushing for an elementary administrator, and so I was to be half-time administrator and half-time teacher.
Oh.
And I tried every combination in the book on that. I never did find one that worked out satisfactorily. But he was a very good school administrator, and finally he convinced the Board of Education that I should be full-time administrator. And I think at one time we had 24 teachers were the most teachers that we had.
Well, that's getting to be a pretty fair-sized school.
It was a pretty fair-sized school for a country town of about 2,000, and it was pretty much consolidated.
I was wondering if it was consolidated now.
We ran 6 buses, and at one time we had 3 sections of every classroom.
Oh.
So it was a good size.
So basically a farming community.
Farming rural community out in western Kansas, about 100 miles west of Wichita. And all the time I had been going to school. I think that's one unique thing about my education is I started way back in the 30s, and I never really completed a degree until in the 50s.
Is that right?
I started summer school after the war, and I went every consecutive summer until I had completed my master's degree.
Did you get kind of tired of that, Lloyd?
I got kind of tired of it. My family probably got more tired of it than I did, because to me it was the summer job.
Sure.
And I don't know, it's hard to find jobs to fill in the summer for school teachers, and it was my way of getting to the up the ladder.
Where did you do your graduate work, Lloyd?
Well, I did one summer in Emporia, and then I transferred, when I went to Greensburg, I transferred to Hayes.
That was closer then, wasn't
That was 100 miles. I was 100 miles south there. And we'd always come home on the weekend, or I'd always come home on the weekend. But I think that's one unique thing in that in all of my college training, I only have one regular term, academic term as they call it, first and second semester of training. So the rest of it was the hard way.
You were the hot summer
can be done.
Teacher, yeah.
Can be done.
Well, evidently, from what you've been saying so far, Lloyd, you said when you went to service, well, now at least I won't have to teach. You came back to it, and you stuck with it. So you must have come back to something you liked more than you realized. I
think I probably am a pretty person-oriented kind of human being. And I guess I am particularly child-oriented. I don't have trouble with kids. In my world, I have my troubles with adults, not with kids. I always got along with children real well.
So you like those elementary children?
I liked them. I enjoyed those years. And I guess I always felt like, they reported that I always tried to get them to do their best, and to me that's a pretty good kind of characteristic.
We can't ask much more of people, can we? No, indeed. Well, you were pretty well settled now in western Kansas, and how about, was this the 5-year plan for you and your wife still going on, or what?
No, that's what blew the 5-year plan, because every time I came to move, the pay increase was so great that it took the incentive out of moving.
Oh, they were paying you pretty well now.
So I had chances to go to other school systems, but they wanted me there, and so then that's where I started in the 60s for my specialist degree, and completed it at Fort Hays.
Some more summer school?
Some more summer school and Saturday classes. And then I guess I decided I just must change.
You felt it was time now?
I felt it was time. And
when about was that? How long had you been over in western Kansas then?
I'd been in this one situation, one school, 18 years.
You figured if I'm going to move, I better do it, huh?
Well, I kind of got the feeling when I went around and inquired at positions, they asked me how long I had been at my present position, and when I said 18 years, they couldn't figure out why I wanted to move. And I figured I just better get to moving, because I'm either going to stay there and ride that out the rest of my career, or I've got to move now. And so when I got my specialist degree, I began inquiring in the states around Kansas in the teacher training schools, because I thought I had faced about every kind of problem that you could face in schools and had resolved it, and that to help children, the best place was to be in teacher training, that I had something to offer there. And teaching in college or the university had always been the farthest from my thought. I never dreamed of it until this hit, and about teacher training. So that meant you had to go to higher education, and that was also about the time that many of the colleges and universities were expanding, particularly in teacher education. I mean,
what year would this might have been about? What time was it?
Well, 1969. It was the spring and
about
summer.
70, huh?
Yeah, 68, 67 was in there also. They were good years, and I guess I was about on the last year of when, you know, of that phase. You either went then or you didn't go again, you know.
Reminds me of when you were told about the previous one. You got that teacher certificate. You were the last one to get it without going to college.
Yes. Right? And so I got a call from Dr. Holly Bethel.
Oh, dear Holly. Yeah.
And she wanted me to come for an interview. And you were supposed to have your contract in the public schools by April the 15th, but and this was a day or two after the 15th, but my superintendent said, you know, you go ahead and go, and if it's what you want, why, okay, we'll work it out.
Well, that seemed like a nice thing.
So I did, and they...
Did you come up to Omaha then for the first time?
For the first time.
How did it strike you?
Well, we had gone across western Nebraska. It was my second time in Nebraska, first time in Omaha, and my wife, she was from a farm family also, but she had a little more big city orientation than I did, and it was a kind of a new life for me. I mean, you know, the traffic and the whole show.
Different.
It was a whole different thing.
How did the university strike you?
Well, it struck me as a real good, real strong teacher training program. And of course, I was 50 years of age. That's one of the things I told. If you talk to Holly Bethel, she would say, she always remembered. I said, well, now, you sure you want me? Because I'm 50 years old. I had taught 30 years in the public school. And but I came up, and they, you know, escorted me around to the campus. And when I look at it now, you wonder, you know, what was there when I came.
Yeah.
And
it's a different place, isn't it?
Considerably different. It's fact of the matter, it's unbelievable that the change. You really couldn't. You know, there was the administration building, or I call it the White House building, and the student center. And
the student center was the shack, wasn't it?
Was very small. They hadn't.
Yeah, they hadn't had all the additions by it. Right.
And the library, and they had built a science building, and And HPER was the old gymnasium with Quonsets around, and there were Quonsets over here.
The building we're in today wasn't here.
Was not here.
The Hyper building.
The business building wasn't here. The new library wasn't here. The other science building wasn't here. Power building wasn't here. No, it was.
It was a fairly small university.
It really was.
But you must have liked it.
Well, yes, I liked it.
Yeah. Maybe Holly Bethel had something to do with that, huh?
Well, she was a top-notch. She was a top-notch person. She was a high-quality kind of person, and I moved in. I moved up in the summer. That was quite a move.
Was it?
We had come up and looked for property, house, and we finally took an apartment over here on 49th Street up from Saddle Creek there.
Oh, fairly close to the university.
Fairly close. And my wife had worked for Inner North out in the field. Out where we were, they had booster stations, and she had worked as a communications specialist there. And so her boss told her when she came to Omaha, he was going to notify him that she had a job up here. So she took vacation while in the interim, and we getting a telephone and everything. We were about down to the last day of vacation when they called her and said, "Come to work."
Well, isn't that nice?
And so she worked there for until she retired, and so both of us were busy. I mean,
as you started out here at the university in those first years, after you and Holly and I suppose Dean Gorman came to an agreement you're going to come, what were the things you first became involved with here at the university? What things did you teach?
Well, I first taught health and safety for elementary teachers, and then of course they were short of supervisors for elementary teachers.
Practice teachers.
Practice teachers, student teachers, yes, and that was really my cup of tea, and so I got 6 hours in that. And I thought another unique experience when I came here and went around the interviews, and when they had sent me a pamphlet that had Kurt Naylor's name in it, and I asked her, Holly Bethel, when I was making an appointment for the interview, if this was the Kurt Naylor I knew, because I had had a Kurt Naylor as my advisor at my master's degree down at Fort Hays.
Yeah.
She said, "Yeah, that's the same Kurt Naylor."
Is that right? Is that
right? That was a kind of a unique experience.
Indeed so, yeah.
Because he had left there and gone to Oklahoma, and then I lost track of him, and he had come up here as vice chancellor, I guess, at that time, and then chancellor. And that was kind of a unique experience.
That made you feel a little more at home to begin with.
A little more. At least I knew I had a friend in the area.
Yeah. Yeah, well, did you find the change from what you'd been doing all these years, Lloyd, to this element that you were in now at the university level? Kind of a different situation, a tough one? What was it like?
I found it very different because I guess and they denoted me as this, as a generalist. I knew a little bit about a lot of things. But when you get on the university level, it becomes different. You've got to know quite a bit about something. And of course I didn't have too much trouble with the student teachers, but I had to tool myself up for coursework, because I had, you know, in my preparation I had not gone in depth in those kinds of things, and that's the kind of thing you have to do at university, is to go into in depth. And my first course here was that first summer in '69. I taught a human growth and development course for Dr.
Was it Dr. Dunn by any chance? Joe Dunn?
Joe Dunn.
Know him well.
Yes. And,
wonderful man.
Yes. And then my course, the course that I was tooled up for, was a requirement course, so I always had 2 classes of it every semester, every summer, all the rest of the time.
But you felt most comfortable with the teachers, huh?
With teachers, yes. Of course, one of the differences, college students challenged you more than grade school youngsters. Grade school youngsters pretty much believed everything you told them, you know. But you face some challenge, some kind of different kinds of, and you met a wide variety of people. I mean, there were people that had been to Europe, people here and there, and the span of their experiences was so broad as compared to what I had experienced out in a rural community where all the children were either small town or country.
Yeah. Did you miss those days?
Well, they were good days. I don't know as I missed them. I guess it was a smart move. I mean, it was good.
Didn't
for
regret
me.
it?
I did not regret it. No, because
well, you spent a lot of time at it, as it turned out. Yeah.
It was a very rewarding experience.
Was the program when you first came between what year now was it that you started?
1969.
All right. When you came in '69, the teacher education program that you became a part of, much different than what we have today as we look back in retirement at it?
Well, I think the changes within the department and the college are unbelievable. I wouldn't have believed.
What are some of the things that stand out?
Well, when I came here, we were known as elementary education, and there was secondary education, and then the programs in that, and then we retooled or changed, and we became known as teacher education, which meant that elementary and secondary teachers were of one mind, one concern, and that was a good move, but it took some patience and some time. The programs, but I think the healing is all over now, and it was a good move, and it had to be, because that's the way education had to go. And I guess I used to think that, you know, one of my philosophical thoughts, I guess, was that education would save the world if we could ever get everybody educated. I don't know whether we get lots of criticism. We've covered lots of territory, but I still have hopes in education. It's put us where we are. I think it's real difficult for my generation to give up the good old days, and I think even like in medicine, you know, you go, if you want to be in the front line today, you go to the young doctor, because he has everything that the old doctors had, and the same thing happens in teaching. We have some outstanding young teachers, and it's like everything else, though. You get judged by sometimes the public gets on you, and they judge everybody by the marginal, and that's really unfortunate, because that's not the way it is, and people still are not willing to pay for education. I don't know when that movement will ever get started, but
they want things, but they don't want to spend the money.
They don't want to spend the money for it.
Yeah. Now, you know, along those lines, Lloyd, you had a very thin education as you started teaching. Certainly in 1989, the young teacher going out has 4 years and all this and all this. What would you say as you look back through your own life as a teacher and the teachers you had? Are teachers generally coming out and pretty strong shape now compared to what they used to? Are they a lot better? Are they different? What are they like?
They're a lot better, and a lot more is expected of them, of course, is the reason why they have to be better. I mean, basically, back in the 30s and before World War II, teachers were known as dispensers of academic, of knowledge kinds of thing. I mean, I was smart in books, but, you know, but today you deal with emotions and feelings and sex education and drugs and how to handle problems that we never even thought about in those times. I mean,
it was pretty simple then compared to
mental health and that kind of thing. I mean, I taught it in college here that you had to be concerned about children and their feelings, but I don't really remember any of those kinds of things even coming up. So education has come a long way in that now, I guess we say we educate, and this is, I guess, a jargon term, but we educate the whole child. We have to look in his eyes and see his heart, and we have to maybe the book learning is the smallest part of what we do for him today.
Do you think that's the way it ought to be, Lloyd?
Well, I think that's the way, yeah, it ought to be. I think that's the way it has to be today to function in today's world, because today's world is very, very complex. I mean, I talk to fellows that are in the 40 and 50, and they say, you know, when I was a kid, going on a trip was going 100 miles away from town. Well, kids now are born in another country or have traveled. I mean, my grandkids have been to more places and farther distance than I have, because that's their life.
Yeah.
That's their lifestyle. I mean, it's...
That reminds me of something that you just mentioned. That you didn't tell me more about the family. We met your wife briefly, but you have grandchildren. How about the rest of the family? Who else is included? We
had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and our daughter lives in Houston, and we have she has 2 children, a little boy, a boy 11 and a girl 12, and then we have our son. His wife lives in Manhattan, Kansas, and we have a grandson there. He was killed in an automobile accident, and that was one of the most traumatic things in my life. I mean, there are two really traumatic events that happened in my life. That was one of them, and the other was the flood of '51, where we lost everything we had.
Is that right? Well, that's 2 terrific incidents in your life that stand out in memory. The flood, you mentioned that too earlier. You literally were wiped out? We were wiped out. Yeah. Your home, everything?
Well, we were just getting ready to move. That was the '51. That was the end of the first 5-year period, and we were sitting there ready to move to western Kansas, and the water got in our house the first time about 12 inches, and so they said the warning the next time, and we put it up higher, but it went just over the dining room table in our house, so everything we had, you forget it. I mean, well, we salvaged it because we didn't have anything else. I mean, we had to have something to live with, furniture. So we hauled it out in the cattle truck, but we washed part of it up and eventually replaced it. But it was that was a traumatic time.
Well,
we stayed about 2 months too long.
Yeah. Timing was a little bad with the weather. Well, I'm glad we were able to include that in your reflections too, because both those factors are important in a man's life, with his family and where he happens to live and the problems that come and go. Now let's come back to the campus again. I think you'll agree with me, Lloyd, that while you mentioned earlier that all the change is just unbelievable the way the campus has changed, people come and go too. They work, colleagues, friends, students. I'd like to ask you now, as you think back, what are some of the names that come to mind? People past and present that stand out, and why? Just come up with a few that you think of that have meant a lot to you and in turn to the university, you feel.
Well, probably my success at the university. Bob Ackerman needs to be credited to that. He was always a very positive kind of person. I used to get angry, but the next day, because he would never give you a definite yes or no answer. He would always leave you with, you think it over kind of thing, and this kind of thing. And Dean Denoska,
oh yeah,
Paul Kennedy.
Oh yes.
And our colleagues in the department. I guess if I had to do over again, I don't know whether I'd change it or not, but I really never got involved in activities outside of my college. And I suppose that part of that was due to my experience when I came here. I was 50, and my life was pretty much determined, and so my activities were on committees within the college. In other words, I didn't bowl. I didn't get involved in the Senate and that kinds of things, and that's where I think you get acquainted across the university campus.
You felt you sort of missed something there,
I missed
perhaps.
something there. But that's the way it was.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you were involved and liked your work, and you had good people in the college. And you know, university this side, we tend to stick with our own group in many ways, pretty much at the time, I think, too.
Well, as soon as we got here, we started the campus started expanding, and I guess you just got farther and farther away from people. And see, Kaiser Hall wasn't here yet when
that wasn't ready
so
yet.
we moved into Kaiser Hall, and then, of course, the business administration building, and and this building, and the library, and you know, and the science building, and the power plant, and the whole thing. You know, you sit here now and you wonder, was there anything here when I came?
There was, but it's almost hard to remember what it was
hidden.
like.
It's almost hidden.
Yeah, but it was, and it was filled with people, and of course it is filled all the time, or we wouldn't be here with students, Lloyd. And I was wondering, over these 20, well, much longer than 20 years, 40 years in some probably, when you go back to your early days of teaching and administrating, you've worked and got to know little children, big children, adults, senior citizens. Are the students today, at the last class you taught, are they in a general way much different than what you had over the years? How are students, what are they compared? Are they always the same? Are they different?
Oh, I think that the people who are going into teaching now have to really feel a pretty good, pretty strong calling. I think I have experienced students who have been, I guess I call it, shoehorned into teaching by their parents and so on, who really didn't like it and didn't do well and got out and that kind of thing. And I also came probably in an era where there was a great teacher shortage, and anybody who would stick with it long enough could get certified and become a teacher. I think they are moving away from that now. I think people are being advised that they seek their degree in other fields, and I think the counseling and advising has improved tremendously.
Now, let's we can always do this because nobody knows for sure. Let's take a look at the future. You've been involved with education for these 40 years or so, Lloyd. Now we've got television, we've got the computer, we have, and of course we've still got these people all around us. What do you think schools are going to be like in the future? I think there are going to be a lot of changes that are going to make it different.
There definitely are going to be changes. I think it's going to be hard for the schools to admit, but I think they are teaching, or have been, and are accused of this, of teaching a lot of knowledge that students didn't want to know or already knew. And I think we are becoming more sensitive to what the needs and wants of students are. And there's even some talk today about going back to smaller schools, that we have gone to large schools, they're efficient to operate and administrate, but you lose the personal touch. You lose the contact with the student. And it's my belief that if you're going to if you're going to make a change, you got to be in touch with human beings.
I think just a little while before we recorded this, made this tape, Lloyd, I heard of a report that came out from the Carnegie Commission or something like that, really castigating schools and the fact that we weren't along the lines of what you're saying. We just aren't giving them the proper education in a general way. Do you think that's true?
Well, yes, and I think you know, the technology, and it's real difficult for my generation to give up the good old days and come up to today and see things. And it's hard for teachers to do that because, after all, every teacher wants security. They want and change is threatening.
Right.
And it's real difficult, but it's a whole new world, a whole new source of information and knowledge is becoming so, you know, so much more of it that you know, you can't know everything today. I guess there was a time when people thought they could know most of everything, but that day's gone. You can't even know all of everything in your own field now. I mean, and I think teacher training programs have got to change. I think, and this is hard for them to do too.
What ways do you think they basically ought to change, Lloyd?
Well, I think that they need to become more sensitive to students, and the topics that we didn't even talk or teach about 25 years ago are here: drugs, mental health, how to deal with your feelings, careers, I mean jobs. I mean, there are jobs coming on every day now that didn't exist 25 years ago. You know, I mean, I talked to an 8th grader just yesterday, and I said he was quite a musician. I said, you know, are you a musician? You going to be a professional musician, or is this just a hobby? He says, oh, I think it's just a fun thing. He says, what I really want to be is an astronaut. You see, I mean, kids have got visions now that I can remember when the first space shot, I went into the kindergarten room and said to them, you know, how would you like to go up there? And one little boy held up his hand and said, I don't want to go. I'm too young to die. But that's over, you see.
That's a sign of the times and change, isn't it? Yeah, that's interesting, right?
It's different.
Another thing I wanted to have you share on our tape as we sort of wind things up here is, now you and your good wife are going to have, as they say about retired people, time on your hands. Well, that doesn't always work out. Sometimes people are kind of busy. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to, Lloyd? Well,
I think, as I said, I'm pretty much a person-oriented kind of, and we do volunteer kinds of things, and we love to play bridge, keep up our social life. We're involved in church work. We are not great travelers, however we do plan to travel some and do some things. We have a trip planned for this August up in the Northwest. When we were young and had the kids, why, it was to her parents or to my parents, were basically. But now we can do a few things. I guess I don't really see time on my hands. You slow down some. You don't have the energy level that you once had. And I guess I don't think we'll fight at home because she works inside and I work outside.
You're the yard man, huh?
I'm the yard and flower and garden man, and she's the sewing. She loves to sew and shop and that kind of thing. And
sounds like you'll keep kind of busy.
I don't really think we'll have any trouble with our time. It's just good to be able to sleep until 8 o'clock if you feel like you want to.
Yeah. One last thing I think we could do now is we sort of look back, if you would, Lloyd, over all these years. And that is to, you're going to have, it sounds like an enjoyable time in retirement, and we hope that'll be the case, but you're going to miss some things too. Of all these many years of teaching and some administrating, what are the things that stand out that you think you're going to probably miss the most?
Well, I think the thing I'll miss the most is probably my colleagues. Of course, they cautioned me. They said, "No, don't you forget to come back." I guess I feel like I always got along with my colleagues really well. I always tried, even my students, and teachers, thought everybody should be a success. And I really don't have any bad or hard feelings about things, but it'll be the colleagues. I kind of got out of partial retirement. I've kind of got the student out of my systems, because I had 3 or 4 years of that where I didn't really deal with
sort of tooling down,
and that was good. And I guess the reason I hung on was that I could approach a 50-year career. And I think the unique thing was I went from a country school, my first year teaching that country school. When I drove up in the yard that first day, I said to myself, or I thought to myself, is there a way to get out of this? And there wasn't any way to get out, so I went in and locked the door and started school. But from one end, from the country school to the university, is unique, I think. There are not many people that make that kind of transition. And the other was my training, scattering it over a lifetime and doing 50 years of it. And it was against my wife's better judgment, but I guess I'd always been poor and I couldn't give up working.
Lloyd, it's been pleasant visiting with you and getting a picture of your life and your family and your work, and I appreciate your taking the time to do it.
Well, thank you. It's been a joy.
We've been sitting here for around an hour now in the Health Physical Education building here at UNO, visiting with Lloyd Gwardney, visiting about his life and times on a series we've come to call Reflections in Time.